Morning everybody, welcome to Solo ReacTalk. This morning I'm returning to Luton 09. I'm going to be reacting to the Great NACHMUND War, Part 2, Vigilus Burns, Warhammer 40,000 lore history made on the Luton 09 YouTube channel. If you guys want to check out my reaction to Part 1, as well as other Warhammer 40k content created by YouTubers, remember the playlist card is going to be at the top here. Just click on it and you'll be able to access them. If you want to check out the original video, part 2 of the Great NACHMUND War, as well as Luton 09's YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. Yes, in part 1 of the Great NACHMUND War, yeah, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, we were given a overview of what's happening in the galaxy in terms of the Imperium of Man being separated into two parts. Not just the Imperium of Man, but the galaxy itself. Physically, it's been separated into two parts by the Cicatrix Maledictum. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. The Great Rift. In terms of the Imperium of Man, it has separated the Empire into Imperium Nihilus and Imperium Sanctus. Imperium Sanctus, the Astronomicon still shines in the warp. Communication through astropathic communications is still possible, and the Empire is still pretty much in a stable position in Imperium Sanctus. In Imperium Nihilus, there is no communication with Imperium Sanctus because of the Great Rift. The Astronomicon is not shining in Imperium Nihilus because of the Great Rift. The Great Rift cannot be traversed through traditional means, using sublight drive engines or using the warp. If you try, your ship will be destroyed. You cannot go under it, you cannot go above it, you cannot go around the Great Rift. But luckily, there is a narrow corridor passageway called the NACHMUND Gauntlet that has been found, and we don't know who created it, we don't know how it was created, but it's there, and it connects Imperium Nihilus and Imperium Sanctus together. And there is one planet on the Imperium Nihilus side that you could say is the linchpin, is the catalyst or access point into Imperium Sanctus, and that planet is called Vigilus. And Vigilus is a planet that's in turmoil. Politically, economically, socially, it is a planet that has been rocked not only by human incompetence in terms of the leadership structures of the planet, but also it's been infiltrated by xeno races like the Dark Eldar, the Orcs, who else? Dark Eldar, Orcs, and the Chaos influence in terms of Nurgle and his demons who have infiltrated the planet and infecting the populace with various types of diseases. And now also Abaddon the Despoiler is heading to the planet because of its significance and importance for the Imperium of Man, in terms of it being the front line of connecting Imperium Nihilus and Imperium Sanctus. Also, Robute Guilliman, the Lord Commander of the Imperium of Man, has also recognized that this gauntlet is very important for the continuation of the Imperium of Man as a unit, as a cohesive empire, if I can say that. Because currently there are no other pathways, crossing from Imperium Nihilus to Imperium Sanctus. So he has invested a lot of forces into protecting the planet Vigilus, and he's also sent the chapter master of the Ultramarines, Marinus Augustus Calagar, over to the planet. And yeah, essentially they're trying to stabilize the planet. They're trying to make sure that the planet is secure under Imperium of Man control, and also expunge all the xeno threats that are on the planet. Oh yes, I also forgot the Genestealer cult is also present on Vigilus. So yeah, it's a merry-go-round of different factions vying for control over this planet, and the Imperium of Man is trying its best to hold on to it, and let's hope they can succeed. let's continue with part 2 and see what happens. Yeah. 3, 2, 1, go. Luton still got it. Yes, he is hitting it with the opening music. He is hitting it with the opening music. I love it. Okay. I claimed this planet the moment I set eyes upon it, and the fools who toil in its defense are dead men. Abaddon the Despoiler.
In M41, the galaxy would be torn asunder. The Imperium left riven by the catastrophic psychic tear, its emergent forces that emanated from the cicatrix maledictum, both damaging and empowering humanity, its worlds and forces lying bestrewn along the wake of the Great Rift. Those on the side of the galaxy which still lay in the light of the Emperor, Imperium Sanctus, were able to stand firm, resolute and united. The return of Roboute Guilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines, the Lord Commander of the Imperium, was desperate to reach the dark side of Imperial territory, the Imperium Nihilus. None knew if the worlds on this side of the galaxy had even survived the great cataclysm that had torn through it. Ships could not traverse the incredibly disruptive power and storms of the Great Rift that made warp travel to traverse it near impossible. It lay as an impenetrable tempest between two halves of the galaxy. Any ships who attempted to cross it would be shattered, crushed, and torn to pieces by incomprehensible forces. The direct cause of the Great Rift itself remains unknown, although Guilliman and the forces of the Imperium rightly suspect their nemesis enemies, the traitorous Astartes, led by Abaddon, who continued his unending campaign to wreak vengeance and destruction upon those loyal to the Emperor of Mankind. The Dark...
I remember Luton saying that there were rumors that it was actually the Emperor who created the gauntlet. Like how Moses was able, from Earth history, Moses was able to separate the Red Sea. So they're saying something similar happened here with the Emperor using his psychic might to separate the Great Rift and make this narrow corridor passageway for Imperium Nihilus and Imperium Sanctus to be connected. We don't know if that is true. I don't know if that is true. Maybe Luton can further expand on that. Maybe it was the Emperor or it's something else that created the gauntlet. But yeah, the Imperium of Man is lucky that it's there, because honestly, there's no other way to traverse the Great Rift so far as we know.
Imperium Nihilus had struggled to make contact with those on the opposite side of the rift. Astropathic communication, the only long-distance method of communication in the Imperium, remained difficult if not impossible. Worlds on this darkened side of the Imperium were unable to call for aid. Many were continually being assaulted or raided by the darkest of humanity's enemies, such as the Drukhari. Many planets were isolated and besieged. Guilliman had deemed it absolutely critical that his forces find some means by which to locate or otherwise secure a stable access point to enable travel across the vast warp disturbance of the Cicatrix Maledictum. for this would be necessary to enable a continual transit of Imperial fleets between the two regions and enable continual campaigns, for no one knew just how long the rift could exist. If this were to become the new reality for the next 10,000 years, the Imperium would have to learn to adapt. Any natural space bridges across the rift would become immediately absolutely critical, and indeed...
Yes, they will be critical. The Imperium of Man would have to invest in whatever planets are on either the Sanctus or the Nihilus side. They will have to become fortresses, bastion planets, and essentially they will have to be creating a lot of Cadias, a lot of very powerful, influential planets that is going to have a lot of Astra Militarum units there, the Astartes, and all other, factions of the Imperium of Man have got to invest on those planetoids or, celestial bodies in those areas, just to make sure that the access points are belonging to the Imperium of Man, and Imperium Nihilus and Imperium Sanctus can continue to be one Imperium of Man. We can't have not even one bridge or one narrow corridor to be under the control of any Xeno race or by chaos, because it's just going to create a lot of problems further down the line. So definitely any other access point, any other planetoid that is within the vicinity of a bridge or a corridor through the Great Rift has to be heavily protected. Has to be.
These links could determine the very survival of those members of humanity who now existed in the Dark Imperium, a region estimated to be roughly around 1/3 of the galaxy. The NACHMUND gauntlet was discovered soon after the rift had torn through the galaxy and was one of the first warp corridors known to bridge between the world of Sanguis Terra within the Imperium Sanctus and on its opposite side the planet of Vigilus within Imperium Nihilus. Now, if you wanted to know just how and why ships would traverse the NACHMUND gauntlet, I would refer you back to Vigilus Part 1, where I discussed many aspects of warp travel. Essentially though, the point is that in the galaxy of the Imperium, your ships do not simply travel instantly from one point to any other in the galaxy. It requires complex, difficult navigation, using the most stable and well-charted routes to reach a destination. While the warp enables humanity a means by which to travel through the galaxy faster than in real space, it comes at an immense price of being both difficult and very dangerous. So the arrival of the Cicatrix Maledictum meant that many charted routes were now completely obliterated, meaning that in the contemporary period for the Imperium, they faced the prospect of any stable routes crossing the rift becoming quickly raging war zones of unfathomable strategic importance, which, upon its discovery, is exactly what the NACHMUND Gauntlet and Vigilus became, a focused and immediate pressure point for the Imperium and its enemies, to which the Lord Commander sent his forces rushing toward. Yet, as we learned previously, Vigilus had already been deluged by troubles, a stagnant, self-indulgent, incompetent ruling council, as is all too typical for Imperial worlds, orcs looking for a good bit of edge smashing, genestealer cults, and lastly with a grim inevitability, the dark forces of chaos. Hearken, World Claimer, Herald of the Apocalypse, and now, Abaddon, the Despoiler. Vigilus faced darkness from all sides. Hordes of orc invaders attacked Vigilus from the barren wastelands, launching their assaults against the hive-sprawl cities, and despite taking continual heavy losses, their spirit was in no way diminished, and the hordes would continue to attack whenever they could. In no small part because of one cruel Daka, the Speedlord Supreme, the leader of the orc war effort. His hidden run assaults were a continual headache for many of the Imperial commanders, and despite any number of Imperial knights having vowed to defeat him, he remained elusive. The cult of the Pauper Princes had fully emerged from below the hive spores, infesting hive streets and infrastructure, and the Imperials had limited resources with which to deal with them. But they were frequently fought off by local forces, but for all of their great efforts of the hive defenders, the cultists' numbers seemed indomitable.
And this brings into question what have the Adeptus Ibetes been doing this whole time on the planet? because they are supposed to be the first and last, well, not the last line, but the first line of defense, against infiltration from Genestealer cults. They are the people who are supposed to be responsible to make sure that these type of things are expunged from the hive cities. But clearly the incompetence of the leadership structure of Vigilus has filtrated down into other very important and vital institutions of the planet Vigilus. Because really the Adeptus Arbites should have really dealt with this situation before it got out of hand as it is right now on Vigilus.
Persians also contributed with the ongoing conflicts over vital resources. The Genestealer cult of the Pauper Princes had seized the space elevator, supplying the extremely essential water to the vast sprawl of Mega Borealis. And while the Orcs and cultists fought with each other over reservoirs, the impact it was having upon the Imperial hive spores was reaching now a severe point of criticality.
And the South, I think the South Pole or the North Pole, there are people that collect ice water from those regions of the planet, and that operation is also being hampered by the Dark Eldar. They are raiding, in those areas, and they're taking people there, they are abducting them. And there's also some sort of dangerous animals that live in the South Pole or the North Pole of Vigilus, and it's extremely dangerous. So the workers can't collect the ice and take it to the hive cities because of the Dark Eldar and because of the very dangerous life forms that live in that area. And now also, in terms of this, what should I call it? Like a space tower? the tower that collects asteroids in space, the ice asteroids in space to get the water, is also being compromised by the Genestealer cult. So water on Vigilus is becoming very scarce. It's becoming a very difficult time to live on this planet. Not only are you dealing with xeno threats, but now you're dealing with potential hunger and thirst. There is no rest.
Despite the Orcs and Genestealer cults seemingly being enemies that should have been easily crushed, their sheer numbers and surprising cunning left the Imperials always on the back foot, coupled with them having to split their forces against numerous enemies attacking at unexpected locations. Worse still were the rumours of dark raiders appearing from nowhere, stealing human miners in the frozen south, while in the general populace chaos worship was rife, leading to violent disturbances and plague outbreaks. All the while,
also another thing that the Arbites have failed to deal with, those who are worshipping chaos. The Genestealer cults and the chaos worshippers, they have not been dealt with, or they're not really there to try and stop it, because now it's too late. There's too many of them. They're everywhere. Yeah, it's crazy.
The dark scar of the Cicatrix Maledictum loomed large in the sky, a vast gaping maw that reminded all that their impending doom was imminent.
And the populace of Vigilus cannot look up into the sky. I remember that part as well. They can't look up into the sky because if they do, they'll become mutated by the Great Rift, and they'll have some, scars or just some sort of mutation on their skin, and it will become worse. It will become sick. So essentially, they'll either die by the hands of the government or they'll die by the hands of the warp, essentially. So yeah, they can't look up into the sky. That's how weird this entire situation is. Yeah. You're facing against the xeno threats. You are having a lack of water, food, and now you can't look up into the night sky. Oh yes, and anything that reflects the night sky, you cannot look at it because the reflection will also hit on you, the reflection of the Great Rift. So any puddle of water, any mirror, any piece of or shards of glass, you cannot look at it, because if it is reflecting what's in the sky, then you are in trouble. Yeah, Crazy world.
With the Imperial reinforcements of Astartes upon the world, however, all this had still seemed a problem that could be readily countered and contained. But that was until news arrived that Chaos Space Marine armies were heading to Vigilus, and worse still was that some of their number had already secretly seized the Hive Spires. Harkon Worldclaimer had publicly proclaimed that Abaddon's imminent arrival had already claimed Vigilus for Chaos, and this had a very troubling impact for the populace of Vigilus, and left Marneus Calagar, the Lord Macragge, with no other option than to now prepare for an aggressive counter-assault. The planet was balancing on the edge of destruction, and Calagar had already begun to prepare for the final battle, determined to resist Abaddon's claim on Vigilus at any cost. With Chaos forces fast approaching, the now somewhat redeemed Vigilus Senate vowed to intervene and enacted a motion for a naval expedition to head off the incoming heretics. This unfortunately also meant that they would be opening yet another additional warfront in the Void. So Calagar mobilizes his assets to engage the Chaos invasion in the skies above Vigilus. He gathers the deadliest ships of the Imperial fleet even as the Herald of the Apocalypse continues to spread his message, eroding the remaining hopes among the citizenry. Calagar deploys his pilots and assault squads to engage demon engines, spreading the message as evidently the Black Legion were no longer concerned with illusions about a stealth assault. They simply sought to inflict fear and weakness as a precursor to the oncoming slaughter of their foes, and as Calagar prepares to leave Vigilus in the hands of Pedro Cantor of the Crimson Fists, now aboard his flagship, Calagar sets course for the traitor fleets. But as they leave the planet, they can see the traversed fields of wreckage caused by orc assaults, and Vigilus now stands as a world racked by both war on the planet itself and in its surrounding space. While still in transit, Calagar's worst fears were quickly confirmed. The energy signature of incoming vessels was detected by his bridge crew and identified as an ancient vessel. The identity of the craft was confirmed, and its title was deeply troubling. It was the Vengeful Spirit. This was no ordinary heretic vessel. This was a ship of...
This is one of... Oh, okay, no, it is the ship. It is the ship. Yeah, it is the ship. It's the ship where the Emperor became technically dead aboard this vessel. And Sanguinius died on this vessel. Horus was turned, or should I say, was erased from existence on this vessel. So yeah, it's the ship.
Dark Infamy, the flagship of the ultimate traitor Horus Lupercal, who had dragged the Imperium into a cataclysmic civil war, and the very ship upon which the Emperor of Mankind himself had been mortally wounded. The name of the ship itself appearing on data screens aboard Calagar's ship created a great unease and intense concern among the crew, including many audible gasps. Calagar organised his fleet into a double cordon defence to confront the approaching Black Legion armada. Unlike the strange ancient vessels of history, the Imperial ships had only their considerable firepower to rely upon, and Calagar and his Arch-Commodore, which is a naval rank above captain, had already been working upon multiple strategies to counter any response the traitors could hope to deploy. Abaddon and his lieutenants, however, fully ignored the Imperial fleet, maintaining their course without hesitation.
Why would they ignore you? There's a trap being set here. Keep your eyes open, Calagar. Keep your eyes open. There's a trap being set here.
Calagar's concern grew as he realised they must have a hidden plan which they had not accounted for, which soon was realised for the Imperials as without warning a burst of blurring light materialised on the bridge of Calagar's ship, Laurels of Victory. It was a warp portal, and from it poured incomprehensible creatures, their screams filling the air, tearing at the senses of the humans with intolerable frequencies.
These must be Slaneshi demonettes or something, yeah.
The bridge was immediately a chaotic screaming battle zone as the portal continued to engorge and spew out hell creatures. Pale-skinned, clawing, androgynous, writhing, staggering beings with a disturbing, seemingly impossible animation of movement. Without even a moment of hesitation, the Ultramarines were laying down bolter fire, shredding the horrors. But to this, the creatures only responded by dancing and flitting their lithe, paled bodies. Many were evading the worst of the incoming fire, others endured seemingly wounds that should have ended them. And almost immediately Calagar was being assaulted by a greater demon, its 4 clawed arms, one brandishing an ornate spear, and although his honour guard had thrown themselves between him and the horrors, their fire and melee strikes were being deflected by a glow surrounding the being itself. It threw its polearm weapon directly at the chapter master, and although he caught the spear in the gauntlets of Ultramar, he could not resist its strange force, with which the entity forced down upon him.
Come on, Calagar.
It impaled Calagar right through his heart, and the demon tore out his throat. By now the bridge of the Ultramarine ship was in complete chaos.
Wait, Lieutenant, no, you can't just leave us from that very important information. Is he okay? Oh, well, he has a second heart, so maybe he's fine, but the throat, that's the issue now. Oh, okay.
With the best efforts of the Space Marines only barely holding their own ground, certainly not vanquishing the horrors. In a perhaps textbook example of the value of the Navigator class of humans to the Imperium, the ship's navigator who was present at the bridge revealed their third eye, which is usually hidden from all to see, and upon opening it, unleashed a hellstorm of warp energy, which lashed the bridge of the ship itself like a self-contained warp storm. The greater four-armed demon could not stand against the power that had been unleashed upon it and was deluging the now horrors of the warp. They all fled screaming and scurrying back into the localized tear in the warp. They had been vanquished, but the initial conflict with the traitors had been by any measure a catastrophic failure. But as Vox communications began to pour in as well from other vessels in Calagar's fleet, the realization of what had befallen them came to pass. The subsequent consequences were even more serious.
So basically the entire fleet was infiltrated by these demons, while Abaddon and his armada just passed them by, going straight for the planet.
The battle to defend against the oncoming traitors was already lost. It was a dismal performance. The fleet had been crippled before it even had any attempt at resisting the traitors. Most, if not all, of the fleet had been penetrated by the demonic incursions and left many of them in a far worse state than the laurels of victory, which had only just survived itself. Screaming, agonized wailing and crazed ramblings were saturating the Vox communications, and the Commodore took decisive action given the now incapacitated Calagar and ordered the fleet to immediately retreat to Vigilus. Any other action would have surely resulted in their total destruction and the certain loss of Vigilus, and perhaps even doomed the Imperium on this side of the Great Rift. But it would not be a disorganised, cowardly fleeing. They laid down fire in a tactical fighting withdrawal. Lances and bombardments were thrown out from the vessels, who were capable in a firestorm of defiance.
Good job, Commodore. If I was a commissar on board that vessel, I'd be like, yeah, that's good. Tactical withdrawal, but you're still fighting. Yes, I like that. Yes, that's a good maneuver right there. Yeah, definitely. If I was a commissar, you'd see me smiling. Really, you'd see me smiling. Commodore, well done.
As was so typical of the traitors, Abaddon's arrogance was all too apparent, and his ships were unprepared for such a defiant assault from the retreating ships, with the traitor ships taking even more damage than they really should have done.
Yeah, I thought they would pass the Imperium of Man forces by, as they're being infiltrated by these demons and, on-board assaults. I thought they would just pass them by because they're preoccupied with fighting against the demons aboard their vessels. And, Abaddon would be straight at the planet. He would do what he needs to do. And, the fleet, the Imperium of Man fleet, will still be incapacitated because they're still dealing with the demons. I thought that's what was going to happen here, but it doesn't seem to be heading that way. They are still fighting against them head on. Just that the Imperium of Man is now retreating in a attack position, if I can say that. Yeah, okay.
Unfortunately, of course, many Imperial ships took a considerable beating in return. Still, it was a small crumb of comfort to hold on to, as now the path to Vigilus was of course entirely open for the traitors, who continued their voyage to now assault the world. As the Commodore did all they could to ensure as many ships as possible survived the return to Vigilus, Monaeus Calagar was in a critical state of survival himself. Being rushed to the Prime Apothecarium, he was urgently attended by a team of apothecaries. His second heart had saved his life. and the new Primaris Belisarian furnace had triggered a flood of stimulants that had kept him alive. His destroyed throat was quickly sutured, remembering that Space Marines have a host of adaptations such as quick clotting and their bodies limiting general damage to injuries that would be very quickly fatal for ordinary humans. Calagar was being aided with regen chem baths and cybernetic surgery, followed by rejuvenant treatments. He had survived, but he certainly would bear the scars of the assault, his voice now edged by a mechanical tinge.
Man, Marinus Augustus Calagar is always going through these life or death situations where he's always on the verge of death. and then somehow, they're going to give him some sort of mechanical upgrades here and there just to keep him alive. And yeah, he's gone through a lot. He's really gone through a lot. And now he has this mechanical singed voice. That's cool. That is cool. I mean, Darth Vader had something like that. So, and it's cool with him. So I'm sure with Marinus Calagar here, it must be cool to, listen to him talk with this mechanical voice. Yeah.
Upon their return to Vigilus, the populace were generally quite jubilant. The nature of things in the Imperium meant that their departure had been talked up considerably by the general propaganda messages in civilian areas and, of course, the Ministorum.
Well, it might not be what you guys expect this time.
Now those same mechanisms would have to explain their surprisingly fast return to the world. But anyone who really had time to think about it would have connected the dots from the fact that the Astartes did not now hold a victory parade through the streets, but instead began deploying in drop pods from the skies to engage with the traitors embedded among the hive spires.
If you have that thought process in your mind, keep it to yourself. Don't tell anyone, don't talk to anyone, don't say anything, act as if everything is normal, even though you know it's not. Okay, you don't want to die, you don't want to be assassinated by someone from the government. Just keep walking, yeah.
Their initial surprise assaults had tipped the balance in places. Elsewhere the hives were already being rotted down through and largely now beyond salvation. Calagar had only a minimal period of time for recovery, but it was enough, and he was now viewing all the information available to him to try and salvage something of the situation, but the picture was inevitably a bleak one. Dirkden, the abandoned and mostly neglected hive spawn of Vigilus, was pretty much already lost, as was Calyx Bane, the glacier mining region which had suffered innumerable assaults by the Drakari. The besieged sprawl of Mortwald had so far held out against the orc assaults, but as with everywhere, it was the ordinary citizens and local militias who were bearing the cost. The indulgent nobles and wealthy hive citizens, the aristocracy, had retreated into their heavily defended secure zone bastions within the hive palaces, and the situation was little different wherever Calagar looked.
It's no surprise that the rich and powerful have decided to close themselves off from the rest of the world and just pretend like nothing is going on. Pretend like everything is hunky-dory until those very monsters start bashing on your door, and then you're surprised. You'll have a Pikachu face going, "Oh, why are they here? Who are these people? What are they here to do?" Really, it's just disappointing that rich people are still going to be the same whatever time period. Whether it's the 40k millennium or it's the 21st century in our real world, they're going to act the same way. They're going to run away, they're going to close themselves off and act as if nothing's going on.
The vast sprawl of Megaborealis was suffering greatly by forces of the Omnissiah and Xenos. The Great Hoist, the orbital relay, had been controlled by the Genestealer cults for some time now, denying vital water for the world, and Dontoria hive sprawl was suffering an out-of-control plague spread by the infections of Nurgle that had fast descended into its depths, and despite immense firestorms and bombardment, had not been contained. Otek and Storval, much the same, no matter the defenders, the Sororitas, Astartes, kill teams, local forces, all were overcome by all manner of dire events and enemies.
It's because you're only dealing with this situation now when it should have been dealt with before it became this unstoppable tidal wave of problems, because this has become a perfect storm. Many of the situations on Vigilus could have been dealt with before they became, far larger problems, especially like with the Genestealer cult, with the Chaos worshippers. It could have been dealt with. It could have been destroyed before it became even worse than it is right now. That's what I'm saying. Like, a perfect storm of all of these problems have just occurred, and now we're just having Abaddon coming in here as the cherry on top of this cake. Yeah, it's crazy.
For the more vital areas such as the Orbital Relay and Mega Borealis, these were the critical locations to focus upon, but few paid any thought for those suffering within, say, Dirkden, the dark and isolated pit of Hivespore which was declared a lost cause upon near the arrival of Calagar, the people within now scratched out survival, facing an onslaught of Genestealer cultists. But worse was still to come. Things were of course chaotic everywhere. It hadn't taken long after the return of the fleet for the populace to begin sensing that something was awry. Even more so when a visible Chaos fleet arrived in orbit. Rumours, news, speculation about Calagar's defeat began to spread like wildfire in the hives, which quickly led to panic, fear, rage, and even those who had been on the fence about siding with traitors like the cultists of the Pauper Princes, or those who even would now welcome the arrival of Abaddon. But by contrast, there were as many who, if they had never been devout followers of the Imperial cult before, certainly were now. Sororitas, who had previously been shown just respect and by degrees of course worship from the very devout followers, were now seen as akin to being saints in the eyes of the ordinary citizens. The
saints that will burn you alive. They're not really here to save you guys, not so much like that. No, they're here for their own specific missions to purge the heretic and the Xeno infestation. That's it mainly. I don't really think they're here to save human lives, not necessarily. But I still like them. I also like the Sisters of Battle. They're cool.
These were their saviours, who were the Emperor's living divine will, and would certainly save them from the horrors that were descending upon Vigilus. Or so they thought anyway. Yet there was one small problem for the traitors. Abaddon had not been aware of the significant presence of the Genestealer cultists when planning the assault of Vigilus. Not only this, but they had no idea of its fighting capabilities or the locations they were embedded within when they began deploying to the world.
I thought Abaddon had agents on the planet. You're telling me that those people did not inform the Despoiler about the current events on the planet? So Abaddon is just coming here unprepared? The arrogance of this man, or of this Chaos man, really, seriously. How can you come here unprepared? You're going to have the shock of your life. You're going to have the shock of your life.
They may think, well, some cultists, that's just ordinary humans with autoguns, maybe a few las rifles and chimera tanks. Well, it's fair enough, but consider also that the Genestealer cultists had already been insurmountable for the fairly sizable Imperial assets on the world, including their pure strain Genestealers and hybrids. So now,
basically, quantity over quality. The quality are the Space Marines, but the quantity, in terms of human bodies, the Genestealer cult has that as their advantage. They will become like an unstoppable wave of flesh and blood just pouring down the throats of these Astartes and the Chaos Marines as well. Unstoppable.
Now, even when bolstered by Astartes, the Imperials were unable to overcome them, not to mention the fact that many of the Genestealer cults had overpowered and seized significant locations and assets since they began bleeding into the open. So by the time the heretic Astartes had been deploying to Vigilus, they were immediately and quite to their shock set upon by the scions of Grandsire Worm. And I think worth to remember, Genestealer cultists are not really just a ragtag band of militia. I mean, by degrees, but they're fully captivated by their powerful, unlikely, somewhat psychically synaptic sense of duty and loyalty to their cause. Their planning and devotion to the cause are in some respects better than that of their militarum counterparts. for in many situations they may be more willing to just throw themselves into decisive actions driven by a blind belief in serving their leadership, more ready to take decisions on the fly that are critical. But all of that...
I also agree with that. They will do whatever means necessary for their cause. Their lives don't matter to them for as long as the cause exists, and the patriarch is there to command them to keep pushing forward, keep doing this, keep doing that. They're unstoppable.
Aside, the traitor marines just did not expect the citizenship of a world to be armed and ready for a fight at this point in time. It's worth bearing in mind as well the vast numbers of citizenry contained within the hive sprawls. Weakly armed or not, it's a considerable weight of individuals to contend with. Even the Legion of Angron had struggled during the Genna Scouring when they were faced with hordes of these strange unarmed semi-citizen constructs who just threw themselves at the Astartes, even crushing some of them under a sheer tsunami of humanoid form. Eventually, of course, they prevailed, but it came at a punishing cost, and not one that they had expected by any means. The same unexpected weight of resistance was now facing those deploying to Vigilus. So Dyrkden had been seen as a relatively soft target, ripe for the plucking by those who revelled in such things, and the Night Lords were chosen for this task along with a renegade chapter known as the Scourged. Now, incidentally, the term Renegade Chapter is another one of those annoying 40k-isms that can be true to several definitions at the same time. Renegade Space Marines are formerly loyalists that have most often been corrupted by chaos, succumbing to the temptations and the machinations of the ruinous powers, now having forsaken their oaths of loyalty to the Imperium. They'll often retain some semblance of their original organisation, their structure, their gene seed, but their souls belong to chaos. They may align themselves with one of the Chaos Gods, or more often follow a path of undivided worship. These renegades are adjacent to those traitor legions like the Death Guard or the World Eaters or the Thousand Sons, who were once loyalist legions during the Great Crusade, but whose legions would be instrumental in the rebellion against the Imperium. Their fall to chaos was often more extensive, more deeply ingrained than that of the other renegade legions, or later the renegade chapters, for they have fully embraced the power and the influence of chaos, forsaking any remnants of their former loyalty. These legions have their own unique traits, iconography, and preferred chaos gods such as Nurgle for the Death Guard or Khorne for the World Eaters. But the term renegade, be it a legion or chapter, can apply just broadly to those Astartes who are considered to have turned against the Imperium for reasons other than the worship of chaos. You could still have a Nurgle worshipping renegade chapter, but who are not quite as fully corrupted as, say, the Death Guard. But the term renegade, be it legion or chapter, can apply just broadly to those Astartes who are considered to have turned against the Imperium for reasons other than the worship of chaos, although notably their isolation and resentment toward the Imperium does commonly lead them down the path that results in alignment with chaos, usually chaos undivided, but sometimes more specific.
So basically, these Astartes that have betrayed the Imperium of Man are in the process of becoming fully fledged Chaos Marines. These renegades. Yes, they've betrayed the Imperium of Man and they are leaning slowly but surely towards chaos. And you could say they're being inducted into it, whichever god they want to worship, or chaos undivided. But essentially, they are in the process of becoming fully fledged Chaos Marines. Yeah, okay.
While renegade chapters and chaos legions share the common trait of turning against the Imperium, the depth of their corruption and their historical background sets them apart. Renegade chapters will still bear some vestiges of their loyalist origins and may struggle with conflicting loyalties, while chaos legions are fully immersed in the worship and service of chaos, dedicating themselves entirely to the cause of their chosen chaos god. So, when the traitors deployed to Dyrkden, they had expected an enjoyable herd of human cattle essentially at their disposal, a veritable smorgasbord of human suffering to be enjoyed. The Night Lords were undoubtedly looking forward to all manner of horrors to enjoy at the expense of the slum citizenry of an abandoned hive sprawl. No doubt the Scourged were eager to get on with, well, scourging. Except there was, of course, one small problem: that they would not be facing a terrorised swath of unarmed civilians and feeble local militia. These still existed in Dirkden, to be sure, but they could not know this, and so only a meagre contingent of Night Lords participated in the invasion, as the majority of their infamous brotherhood were engaged elsewhere near the Eye of Terror. Ramagan Savastus, the leader of the Night Lords, had struck a pact with Abaddon to secure Ashenid non-Hive as the site of their primary onslaught. Guided by his visionary brother, Vhulian, adorned with his skull mask, Ramagan had discerned the potential of the capital city's sizable criminal populace, viewing them as fertile ground for recruiting potential new warriors, or failing that, resilient slaves. Yet even the considerable foresight of Vhulian had not anticipated the irresistible bleed of Xenos corruption that had so heavily permeated Dirkden. The psychic essence of the Genestealer hybrids proved elusive to his senses and those akin to him, and whether this was due to the intentional obfuscation by the cult's magi or an inherent resonance within the shadow in the warp which heralds the arrival of each Tyranid Hive fleet, regardless.
But this is why reconnaissance is important. If you have agents on the planet, they need to assess the situation there. They need to know what your forces are going to be facing up against, and then relay that information back to you so that you can be properly prepared for what you're going to initiate on the planet. But it seems that Abaddon and his associates are so stuck up their own asses, they don't want to really assess a battle situation and then formulate a proper battle plan or a form of attack that's going to become successful. They just think because they are Chaos Marines that they can just roll up somewhere and just say, yes, we're here, and people are just going to be terrified of them. Yes, majority of the time that does work, but not on Vigilus, clearly.
Regardless, it became a pivotal factor in the ensuing conflict, for upon their arrival, the Night Lords unleashed their bloodshed throughout the streets of Dirkden, subjecting resistors to unspeakable tortures. Their battle raged against the criminal underbelly of the continent and the sole remnants who remained to claim the Hive Sprawl. This corrupt syndicate concealed a darker truth, that its members were pawns being manipulated from the shadows. Savastus, Vhulian and their warband soon found themselves fighting for survival, as now a multitude of Genestealer cult hybrids emerged from passages and concealed entrances, joining forces now with the Hive's criminal denizens. The weaponry of the heretic Astartes, be it bolters, blades or lightning claws, exacted a gruesome toll, creating piles of mutilated bodies that served as impromptu ramparts within the exposed chambers of Ashenid non-Hive.
I'm rooting for the Genestealer cult. I'm rooting for the Genestealer cult. Let them destroy these Chaos Space Marines and these Renegades. Let them destroy them right here, right now. Yes.
But undeterred, the cult unleashed wave after wave after wave, seeking to drown the invaders beneath an overwhelming tide of numbers. And it was working. But the cult, cautious of risking their pure-strain Genestealer progeny, dispatched instead Primus Hollandesh from Mega Borealis to secure their dominion, leading hordes of aberrants and metamorph hybrids against the Night Lords in a shocking assault. This formidable charge shattered the Night Lords and the Scourged alike. Thus Dirkden, for now, remained firmly in the grasp of the Pauper Princes, the victors of this harrowing conflict.
Now, I don't want the Imperium of Man to really interfere in this conflict between the Genestealer cult and these Chaos Marines and Renegades. Let them continue to fight amongst each other. Let them become weaker. And then once it comes to a point where they are so weak that they cannot attack you as the Imperium of Man, then that's when you come in there to clear up the rest that are still clinging to life. Yeah, so let these factions fight amongst each other. I'm sorry about the civilians. I don't know what we can do for them, really. Honestly, I just don't know. Right now, I just don't know what we can do for them. Because the civilians in many of these Hive cities, they can't escape to other Hive cities. Because Genestealer cult members might be amongst them. So we just don't We just don't have the capability of detecting this is a regular human and then this is a gene stealer called, converted human being. We just don't have that opportunity here. So the civilians, I am sorry. I don't know what we can do for you, really. They'll just have to find a way to survive amongst each other and, keep themselves away from the fights between the Chaos Marines and the cult members. Yeah. Hopefully the Orcs can also fight with the Gene Stealer and the Chaos Marines so that it's a three-way tussle. And then once they become so weak and unable to defend themselves, the Imperium of Men must come in there and just sweep what's ever left. Yeah, hopefully that can work. I don't know. And then the Dark Elder will deal with them later. Yeah, this is such a nuisance. Okay.
For the Imperium, Vigilus was fast becoming a planetary-scale battlefield triage. There were some areas already declared lost, others were stable but at risk but required still further monitoring, others were in a critical situation and needed immediate surgical attention. This could mean, of course, many things. It may mean life-saving intervention, or it could also mean cutting away badly damaged areas, even cauterization to destroy an area of infection before it could spread. In severe cases, amputation may be necessary. The goal overall, of course, was to save the whole, even if sacrifices had to be made, but too many of those had been made already. There was, though, finally some positive news. At Hyperia, the swift and resolute deployment of the Astartes returning to Vigilus in the hopes of scouring the Chaos incursions within the Hive Spires had been considerably effective. Yet elsewhere, reports continued to pour in, and the increasing gravity of the situation necessitated broader and more drastic measures to confront the encroaching darkness. While there had been practical progress within the spires of Hyperia and beyond, it was slowly becoming evident that Abaddon was not merely deploying his own forces within this theatre, but that he had apparently forged an alliance of renegade chapters and traitor legions against Vigilus, including any number of traitors such as the Iron Warriors, the Night Lords, even the Alpha Legion. And this was a reality that was becoming all too painfully apparent as the Astartes defenders continued to encounter their twisted, corrupted brethren, 10,000-year-old traitors who had sold their souls to darkness and now served masters beyond mortal comprehension. They spoke not. Their bolters did the talking as the corridors carried the sounds of their hatred, thundering sounds ringing the death knell of loyal defenders as they prowled the hive sprawls. Yet this was no simple deployment. This was not merely one legion temporarily aiding another. It was clear that Abaddon had gathered a congregation of traitors like none other, for he well understood the critical importance of this world, and in some cases he literally had said to them, please engage in this fight, but effectively sow as much chaos and discord as you can. Basically, create havoc. For he intended to claim this world one way or another, and if they could not, then the price paid for the world in blood by the Loyalists would be far beyond its material worth. Within the Vigilus Senate, names of the forces assailing the planet were being thrown around by the Imperials, but barely recognised by the nobles and the ranking members of the planet, for these were titles and names that had only previously been heard as whispered legends and rumours at best. The striking clarity that they were not only real but here now and assaulting the world sent a cold shock through the civil rulers of Vigilus, a heart-stopping gut punch, as if some long-distant relative had inadvertently walked across their future grave. For the attending Astartes and Calagar, these were the names of abhorrent traitors, the miserable kin of nightmares, ancient adversaries of the Imperium that must be vanquished once again. The Black Legion with their painfully pointed eyes of Horus, they cast a long shadow over the world. And one of the Ultramarines' most hated nemesis, the Word-Bearers, who came with their inscribed armour saturated with profane scriptures of their Primarch Lorgar, who in their numbers continued to pour down upon the increasingly damaged spires of Hyperia. The Iron Warriors, who broke through the low orbit like an immense wave upon the heavily fortified trench networks of Mortwald, once the comparable masters of siege warfare to their now most hated rivals the Imperial Fists, their knowledge of such matters so intuitive they relished in laying down las cannon fire to dismantle with specificity the bastions and fortresses of redemption that had long repelled the clumsy and random inefficiency of the Orcs. With a terrifying speed and strength, they shattered the Imperial defences, and for as quickly as the Imperial fists moved to counter their advance, they were continually hamstrung and obstructed by the annoyance of Chaos Cult feigns and mass, albeit pointless charges, which kept them continually distracted within the defending lines, while the traitors struck elsewhere. Word had come through that just as Calagar had hoped, the cultists who had previously impaired Imperial forces within Dirkden would similarly impede the progress of the wretched progeny of Kurz. This was no panacea though, for while he knew they could surely not be defeated by such forces, their stalled attempts to unleash a campaign of horror within Dirkden would likely mean they would then redirect their assault towards the Hyperia Dirkden fort wall and the southern regions surrounding Saints Haven, one of their main command headquarters. Elsewhere, critical water purification plants were being afflicted by a strange machine parasitism, being imbued by Abaddon's Vex Machinator, his raw chaos aura afflicting the vital water plants which succumbed to hopeless corruption, wreaking havoc upon both man and machine. Similarly, Dontoria Hivespore, the massive population centre in the north, was plagued still by the Nurgle Plague, which had steadily been spreading after its failure to be curbed early on. It had become so severe now that it was no longer just affecting organic material. Plasteel shanty structures were becoming decayed in every hab block, devoured by ravenous rust curses, while the flesh of its inhabitants steadily blackened before putrefying and becoming dissolved foul sludge. Enormous swollen blisters appeared on the denizens of Grodholv, sometimes appearing to mirror the rift in the skies above, and within these blisters could be seen not only fluid but writhing things, itching, scratching to break out, and if the pitiful victim did not scratch them open, worsening their own infections, they would eventually become so engorged that they just burst like a swollen liquid balloon, spilling out the tiny writhing creatures. The demon maggots grew.
Okay, okay, Lieutenant, you've made your point. Oh my god.
Swiftly like little waddling glitchlings, and their aura infected machines as well as flesh. And much like Dirkden, the situation was becoming strategically untenable. Warp plagues such as this were beyond the Astartes' ability to fight, and Calagar had to bitterly accept the reality that the massive northern hive sprawl of Dontoria may well be lost.
There is no respite. There is no mercy.
Worse still, the initial success within the hive spires had not played out as it had been hoped. The traitors still were inhabiting the spires of Vigilus, and various plans were put forward which often came at too high a price for the citizenry. In the end, the solution they set upon was to light major fires in the core central structure. Sorotas' team set about igniting the inferno, which would leave most spires on Vigilus, along with the traitors within, hopefully fully destroyed. But while generally speaking things were steadily going from bad to worse, at the Omnissiah hoist there had been some genuinely constructive progress.
Omnissiah hoist, that's the tower that's heading into space, okay. Omnissiah.
The immense mechanical contrivance created by the Adeptus Mechanicus, which sprang out of the core Stygian spires before reaching into space that it might drag ice-heavy asteroids to enable the extraction of the lifeblood Aqua Meteorus, was known as the Omnissiah hoist, and it was one of the landmarks of Vigilus. Unfortunately, it had fallen into the cunning claws of a band of pure-strain gene-stealers who had squeezed their way up the pipes to its less protected higher levels, and in a matter of days the primary source of water sustaining Mega Borealis had been severed. A culmination of generations of clandestine scheming was now unleashed with dire consequences. With water on Vigilus becoming ever more scarce, even more than it normally was, the control of the Omnissiah hoist became especially important, and the tech priests rallied their forces for a resolute onslaught to reclaim this prized piece of infrastructure. Below all this, the battles that had raged in Mega Borealis had completely spiraled out of control, flames consuming the land, and though the uprising of the Genestealer cultists had been quelled in most districts of the continent, via relentless efforts of methodical extermination teams comprising Skitarii, Cataphrons, Servitors and Space Marines, the fiercest battles had centred around the grand marvel of technology that ascended into the celestial realm. To give that marvel its full title, it was the Greater Omnissiah Hoist. During the dark days of the War of Beasts with the Orcs, the lower echelons of the hoist had fallen to the cultists of the Pauper Princes. Their meticulous invasion plans employed their covert agents embedded within the Stygian workforce to obtain access codes. However, the upper sanctified levels had resisted their attempts to control much more of the hoist. Then worse still for the cultists, the beeping vigilance of ever-present servo skulls had raised the alarm, exposing their incursion. And all of this disruption is what had enabled the pure strain genestealers, though, to climb ever higher, out of sight and out of mind.
So it was a misdirection.
The conflict moved on, and by the time the engagements with the Orcs were beginning to wane, the struggle for the hoist became ever more urgent, and would see the Iron Hands Astartes execute a meticulous attack upon the holdings designated as being lost to the Xenos menace by the Adeptus Mechanicus. But just as the conflict with the Orcs had been looking to diminish, the arrival of the Space Marines drew the unfortunate attention of those Orc forces, who were suddenly now invigorated by the prospect of fighting with the Space Marines, and would proceed to bludgeon their way through the Hivespore to join in the fray. In mere hours, the Space Marines now found themselves engaged in a relentless battle against two Xenos. Were it not for the calculated prowess and compartmentalized war doctrines of their esteemed leader, clan captain Galkran, they would have swiftly succumbed. Seizing the momentary respite, the Pauper Princes regrouped in the depths of the Stygian spires, but any hopes of a recovery were shattered as the Iron Hand strike cruiser Dark Spear unleashed a punitive barrage upon coordinates relayed by Galkran, reducing vast sections of the Genestealer cultists' claimed territory to smouldering ruins.
That's good to hear. That's really good to hear. The flesh is weak, but deeds endure.
The path now cleared, Mechanicus Castellan robots and devoted cult overseers descended upon the lower levels, advancing methodically, guns ablaze, with horrific phosphor rounds. Simultaneously, now great legions of Skitarii macroclades were dispatching with urgency to reclaim the upper levels seized by the pure strain genestealers, and for once they struck with awe-inspiring might. They surged forth from forgotten transit capillaries, and now at last it was the turn of the genestealers occupying the control hub to discover that the tables had finally turned against them.
The Mechanicus strikes back.
The Skitarii radium carbines and galvanic rifles poured on a storm of lethal fire, decimating scores of Xenos abominations. Driven by their synaptic instincts, the genestealers tore the auto-lumens from the walls, and now darkness enveloped their chamber. In the brief pause, the Mechanicus forces could hear an emergence coming from the bowels of the largest water conduit, which finally saw what only the closest inner circle of the Genestealer cultists had seen until now. Emerging from the pipeline was the immense bulk of the tyrannid progenitor of the Vigilus infestation, the venerable Grandsire Worm.
Kill it. Kill it. Kill the Patriarch.
The Xenos unleashed its monstrous talons, sundering the Skitarii warriors with such force that their bodies rent asunder, blood spraying mixed with sparking wires. Under the Patriarch's sinister psychic sway, the Genestealers and Metamorph hybrids fought alongside their Patriarch, adeptly sealing the transit capillaries with twists of the wheel locks, isolating the Skitarii reinforcements who were still ascending. The massive Patriarch hammered its gnarled fist upon a crimson icon on the primary control panel, and armoured plasteel shutters designed to protect the control tower began to descend. Out of nowhere, the room was suddenly ablaze with fire incoming from outside. The Stygian tech priests had orchestrated a surprise assault to the exterior, employing Onager dune crawlers who had, with their powerful electromagnetic legs, scaled the near vertical slopes of the hive spire. Their neutron laser fire continued to burst and pepper the control center,
Excellent.
already having badly injured Grandsire Worm. The seemingly disorientated remaining pure strain genestealers were annihilated as they were caught in the deadly crossfire. Additionally, the immense pipelines containing the Skitarii reinforcements had been opened, and they surged into the control center alongside the Onager dune crawlers. Together, they pushed back any remnants of the Genestealer cultists and hybrids, reclaiming the control hub of the Omniscient hoist. It was a resounding and well-earned victory.
A win is a win. A win is a win. Take it with both hands. Celebrate, yes, but focus. Focus.
Retaking the greater Omnissiah hoist, it marked a turning point in the battle for Mega Borealis. The tech priests could restore the flow of Aqua Meteoris to the hive spores of the continent, but the greater gene-stealer cult threat was still far from being exterminated, a fact that the Mechanicus and their allies well knew, but this was one of their first significant victories upon Vigilus, and it gave them pause to raise a sliver of hope. Morale was boosted at the news, and a renewed sense of vigilance and determination settled upon all the defenders as they prepared to confront the wider gene-stealer infestation and ensure the survival of not only themselves here on Vigilus, but indeed the survival of the Imperium. Until this point in the conflict, the Imperials had largely taken it as an entirely obvious conclusion that the traders' interest and assaults upon the world of Vigilus were for its strategic location, but there were extremely troubling secrets hidden upon the planet, that so far not even the psykers of the Imperium or the Hive nobility had become aware of, nor had they realised just how dangerous a presence had already been on the world for some time. The so-called Vhulian Swirl was a gigantic never-ending dust storm which twisted and lashed across the eastern frontier of the Hyperia hive spore. It was so massive and dangerous that all avoided it completely. This region was largely believed to be just a barren desert, a wasteland that held absolutely nothing of value, coupled with the fact that this immense barrier fully prevented any realistic attempts to explore the region at all. Any vehicles at ground level or in the air would be absolutely torn to shreds the moment they came near to its immense cyclonic forces, filled with sharp particles of sand and debris that would cut through not just flesh but metal, rendering a person as paste in mere minutes. So this environmental fixture was just a feature of Vigilus rather than some unusual occurrence. It never really appeared to significantly reduce in scale nor ferocity, and it also did not move across a particularly large territory, seemingly to swirl around within a fairly confined geographic space.
Well, clearly this phenomena or weather pattern that's created here is not naturally made. It's not something that naturally occurs. This is deliberate. Someone or something has created this sandstorm, and clearly it must be investigated by someone. I'm actually surprised that the Mechanicus haven't invested in investigating what's going on in this region of the planet. But yeah, clearly this is created by someone or by something. Yeah.
Individuals who may have had a hope of penetrating the swirling vortex of many billions of tons of particulate matter would have been the Astartes with their heavy ceramite armour, or at least vehicles of comparable durability such as Mechanicus transports. The previous Aquilarian Council of Vigilus had consequently dismissed the Vhulian Swirl as a wasteful and irrelevant study.
Why am I not surprised?
But now, the Dark Angel's force that was upon Vigilus had deemed it worthy of investigation. For reasons of their own, they decided to venture into the storm, despite the past failures of the inhabitants upon Vigilus.
Why would the Dark Angels say that, okay, this is important, we're going to go there alone? Nah. This has to probably deal with their, what do they call them? The Fallen. Yes, it has to deal with the Fallen. If they are going alone and they find interest in this swirl storm that's occurring on Vigilus, clearly this has got to deal with their fallen brethren. Yeah.
To their surprise, they even struggled to penetrate this wall of swirling material. They tried rugged transports, armoured bikes in different formations, but all were halted by the swirling sands. Still very determined though, they attempted to press on foot. They held some sense that there was something important within. Unfortunately, with visibility at near zero and electromagnetic interference disrupting their sensors, they were forced to abandon the effort. But their suspicions about something of interest resting at the centre were in fact entirely correct. The swirl had concealed what was known as the Citadel Vigilant, and more troubling for the Dark Angels, it had been claimed long ago by the Fallen, led by one Librarian Osandus.
But how? How did they claim it, since no one can get into this place and get to some location where, they would be safe. Because the storm, the sandstorm, affects anything and everyone, including Space Marines with their armor. So how were the Fallen able to enter into this place and have some sort of beachhead or fortress within the storm? And how is it that, wow, it's amazing that they've been here for so long on Vigilus, and the government structure of Vigilus did not take notice that we have Chaos Marines just right here on our doorstep. Crazy.
The Citadel Vigilant was a monument built from Noctilith, more commonly known as Blackstone. It also contained obsidian and hypersteel. To an ill-educated observer, the lack of weathering upon its surface might have implied that it had been recently constructed. But in truth, it had existed since long before humanity had even stepped out into the stars upon the Emperor's Great Crusade. Those warrior mystics of the Fallen, the broken traitors of the Dark Angels, were protected by the strange temporal aegis of the Citadel. They sought to unlock its secrets and the minerals they'd discovered below the surface, this Noctilith. But they were never able to confirm their suspicions that Blackstone was in fact in any way tied to the power of the Dark Gods. Some had attempted experiments in which they tried to expel the corruption of souls by chaining the victims to slabs of Noctilith while it were charged to then repel the energies of chaos over an entire year, hoping to basically expel push. Still others among the Fallen claimed that the planet was so vital to the future of the Imperium that they had been called there to act as guardians for the final day of reckoning. Whatever their own intentions though, these would fall by the wayside now they'd been tied to Abaddon after he previously had aided them. The Fallen had been established here for some time, using Vigilus as their base whilst they were conducting their investigations into the Citadel and into Blackstone. Abaddon, having located Librarian Asandus, now planned to balance up what they owed. Blackstone, also known as Noctilith in High Gothic, has become one of the most critical materials in the contemporary period of M41. It remains a mysterious substance that possesses unique properties related to psychic energy. Its technical origin remains unknown, but has been found upon various worlds and concentrated in varying amounts, most commonly seen upon the tomb worlds of the Necron Empire, but also on some planets along the length of the Cicatrix Maledictum. It is believed that millions of years ago, before humanity had even ventured out among the stars, during what is mythically referred to now as the War in Heaven, the Necrons used Blackstone to construct pylon-like structures across numerous planets, and in doing so, they were able to create regions of space-time that were null, or otherwise immune to the influence of the Imperium. The reasons as to why they may have done this at that time are unknown. Although very small adjacent, there's the potential reference to this in the novel Wild Rider, which deals with the further exploits of the Inari, and reveals that there is the possibility that at some point in the ancient past, at least some of the Eldar and Necron may have collectively worked together to seal away the warp, which seems unbelievable. But this is suggestive that the warp was becoming so dangerous and problematic even prior to the emergence of humanity that they had to cooperate to do something to seal it. But it need not necessarily point to the existence of what humanity would understand as chaos during that time. Blackstone can be
what I want to know about Blackstone is, does this material or substance occur naturally, or is it manufactured by the Necron tier? Yeah. Because if it does occur naturally, then, I think many more planets should be able to negate or nullify any sort of effect from the warp. Or even like the Great Rift should not be as powerful as it is if there are planets across the galaxy that have got this substance on their surface or underground. Even the Great Eye of Terror should not be as powerful and as large as it is right now. If there are many other planets out there that have got this Blackstone material, and if it does occur naturally, I think maybe these type of warp anomalies should not be as numerous as they are right now in the galaxy. But I could be wrong about that. I don't know. That's why I'm trying to figure out whether is Blackstone occurring naturally or is it manufactured by the Necron tier.
Mined from dark rocks resembling obsidian or onyx, it remains exclusive to certain mineral-rich planets, often correlating with worlds settled by the original Mechanicum, which may be suggestive that the Mechanicum, now Mechanicus, may have had some suspicion or belief or information in the importance of the material long before the period of the Imperium, even if they were not aware fully of what it was capable of.
Now imagine the Emperor knew that the Mechanicus had, or should I say the Mechanicum had in their possession this material. What it could have meant for the Imperium of Man, you know? I don't know what possibilities might have come about if the Emperor knew about Blackstone and its properties, but really I think it would have been a great advantage for the Imperium of Man. But yeah, the Mechanicum had its secrets, the Imperium of Man had their secrets, and the rest is history, I guess.
It also is, as noted, seen upon worlds displaying evidence of ancient mining or the installation of Blackstone monoliths by, again, likely the Necron. In the broader picture though, the true purpose and properties of Blackstone had remained a mystery to the Imperium, but following the opening of the Great Rift, the Adeptus Mechanicus, under the guidance of Archmagos Belisarius Cawl, began to steadily understand the significance of Blackstone. And to this end, the Mechanicus have initiated mining operations across the galaxy to gather enough material for constructing their own zones of stability in real space, aiming to contain chaos incursions facilitated by the Great Rift. However,
I don't like that part where Newton is saying their own zones of stability, not the Imperium of Man zone of stability. So basically they're just focusing on their own interests and not on the interests of all humanity in terms of, you know, where would it be vital for stability, you know, against the torrents of the warp. You know, the Mechanicus of Mars only focuses on its own interests. And, you know, that's not right. You guys are in a partnership. You are married. You need to share. We can't have one spouse doing other things and then the other spouse is not getting the support it needs. You know, you guys need to tango together. Yeah.
However, this quest has brought them into conflict with the Necrons, who also seek to acquire Blackstone for their own purposes of closing the Great Rift and reclaiming the galaxy. Now, I've previously speculated that in the ancient Eldar mythology, they speak about bathing in the warp, walking between the two realms of the Materium and the Immaterium as if they were overlapping like an ocean washing against the shores. And it's possible that the Great Rift was in fact always present, that maybe it wasn't really a rift originally, and that in the most ancient times of the galaxy, when the warp was more passive and calm, it presented no danger and could be engaged with, as the Eldar suggest, without the horror we see in the era of the Imperium. The fact that the Necron already though had structures they seem to have previously used to seal the rift are also suggestive of this, that it became problematic later at some point in time. Although another alternative could well be that during the war in heaven between the Necron and the Eldar, the war became so extreme, especially with the involvement of the C'tan, that they may have actually torn the galaxy apart during that conflict, unleashing maybe not chaos, but certainly malevolent entities from this realm, and that it became necessary for the survival of both Necron and Eldar that they seal the rift. But of course, this is just all entirely speculation. Archmagos Belisarius Cawl has theorized that Blackstone, when properly treated and shaped, could reinforce the structure of the material universe, acting in fact as a barrier against chaos and the warp's psychic energies. He believes that Blackstone structures could prevent empiric manifestations and hold back demonic intrusions and catastrophic warp storms. This revelation has prompted the Adeptus Mechanicus to search now more proactively for Blackstone across the galaxy. But the debate within the Mechanicus has continued to rage. Some speculate that Blackstone even originates from another dimension or resonates with the psychic energies of the Imperium and is capable even of manipulating chaos energy. But Cole's theory of empiric polarity suggests that Blackstone is not inherently imbued with any kind of chaos energy, but that it can be charged under specific circumstances to interact with warp energy. Thus, structures like the Cadian pylons and the Eldritch needles of Nemesis Tessera are believed to be negatively charged, while the ancient Blackstone fortresses captured by Abaddon the Despoiler were thought to be positively charged. And currently, in the most simple terms, these explanations seem to be borne out by the practical evidence. But one of the unusual aspects of Blackstone does seem to be this repelling of warp energy, and it's believed this was in fact why the NACHMUND gauntlet existed at all, that the psychic polarity of the planets were repelling the rift, and thereby allowing a passageway to be formed. It wasn't random, it was because of these physical structures. Over the course of the
So basically all the other star systems that are within the NACHMUND gauntlet also have Blackstone on their planets? Or is it just from Vigilus and the Blackstone on Vigilus is projecting some sort of negative energy that is repelling the Great Rift and making a corridor all the way to Imperium Sanctus? I'm just trying to figure that out. Whether it's only Vigilus that is influencing this, or the other star systems that are within the gauntlet, the NACHMUND gauntlet, also having Blackstone, and they are also helping to repel the Great Rift and making a corridor that is going to be safe enough for ships to go through. Yeah, I'm just wondering about that. Interesting.
Gothic War, Abaddon had also learned that Blackstone could be polarized, and that knowledge has informed his grand strategy ever since. Abaddon would do everything in his power to destroy Blackstone, where it was found to be charged against the forces of chaos, and to seize it where it could empower him. Furthermore, and disturbingly, it was found that by chiseling into the stone blasphemous phrases and runes of dark language, a Chaos Sorcerer could align their aura with the dimensional bleed of the warp, enabling them to channel unpredictable energies using a Noctilith crown, which could lead to a tremendous psychic backlash. And upon Vigilus, the Word-Bearers had been attempting to channel power through these Noctilith crowns, which were aesthetically more like gateways.
Yeah, they look like the Stargate. They look like Stargates. I don't know if you guys have watched the movie Stargate, or you've watched the TV series Stargate SG-1 or Stargate Atlantis or Stargate Universe. Yeah, the devices that they go through to different parts of the galaxy or the universe essentially also looks similar to this type of Blackstone gate that's been created here. Yeah, or Blackstone crown. Yeah, very interesting.
For they well understood that wherever a psychic disaster struck, the purest and most devastating forms of chaos were soon to follow. In the greater period of Noctilith discovery, there remains the disturbing prospect of even alliances being formed. Could the Necron and Eldar form some kind of unholy alliance, or even the Mechanicus and Necron work together to restore stability and order to real space? Both of these seem very unlikely, but anything is possible, and given the extreme aggression of the Necron dynasties, who so far have been not merely conquering worlds, but scouring them of life and exterminating all sentient beings they encounter to increase and in their mind retake their domain, they continue to also construct Blackstone pylons, and in some locations create null fields so powerful, such as the Pariah Nexus, that ships cannot even easily transition in and out of the warp. The null power of Blackstone so strong that even humans who barely psychically register are driven almost insane by the power of the null field.
I wish the Necron tier could focus on building those nullification towers near the Eye of Terror or on the borderlines of the Great Rift. You know, start making those things there so that the Great Rift can be repelled back and the Eye of Terror can also start shrinking. And wherever there's other warp storms occurring throughout the galaxy, they should find some sort of celestial body or a planetoid and build those black stone structures on those places, so that those storms can be further repelled back, and making the galaxies a bit safer. I wish they would do that, but the Necrontyr don't really give a damn about the rest of us. So my hope is that the Mechanicus of Mars could focus on that instead of focusing on their own self-interest. Yeah. Anyways.
For Chaos, of course, Blackstone is truly terrifying. It is the ultimate anathema, for they can do nothing against its powers of nullification. It's true that they can also use it to empower warp energy to extremely destructive consequences, but the prospect of not only the Great Rift being sealed once again, and worse perhaps even the Eye of Terror, it's something that the forces of Chaos cannot allow to happen.
What about the Emperor? Is he able to use Blackstone when it's in a positive polarity? I wonder. If it's close to his vicinity, will it be able to give him power? Will it be enough power that they won't need to sacrifice psychers, to fuel his existence? Is there a way for Blackstone to become that substitute for him? Maybe it might even give him the ability to regenerate his body or something. Yeah, because the properties of this Blackstone seem to be limitless, really. The potential seems to be limitless. Yeah.
Any of this were to actually come to pass, the timing of it will be everything, because it could in fact be devastating for the Imperium if the rift were to be closed too quickly, as the effect it's currently having on humans appears to have also been empowering the Emperor. Blackstone, in the period of M41, truly has become one of the most valuable materials in the entire galaxy, something Abaddon knew all too well as he continued to wage war upon Vigilus. The Dark Age of technology was, of course, this highly advanced age of human technological achievement and prosperity. It was the peak in both scientific knowledge and sociological cultural development of humanity, far surpassing the current state of human technology in the 41st millennium. In the contemporary period for humanity, the Imperium scrapes through the broken detritus left behind from this great era. They attempt to salvage where possible individual pieces, and often tech that is discovered is in fact so far advanced that it's beyond the comprehension of even the Mechanicus, and without a literal complete STC template, a lot of what's discovered ends up having to be simply archived. But during the Dark Age of technology, humanity had developed these awe-inspiring powerful weapons that are the stuff of legend, and are supposedly in instances even rivaling technology akin to the Eldar and the Necrom. In some of the notable examples we do know about that I've commonly discussed here on the channel, one being the Speranza and the other the Spirit of Eternity. The Speranza was a colossal arc Mechanicus. These are the ships used by the Mechanicus to travel through the galaxy. Now, this was a massive ship equipped with formidable weaponry and advanced systems, and just some of these were gravity well projectors, energy lances, nova cannons, things capable of devastating entire fleets and even obliterating planets. But it possessed weapon systems that were only able to be activated by the ship's dormant AI that was in fact entirely unknown to the Mechanicus, and this was able to fire a kind of localized space-time distortion that would cause whatever it came into contact with to phase out of time with itself, causing then the matter to actually exist twice in the same point in time, causing a cataclysmic release of energy. Then of course there was the Spirit of Eternity, another ancient and terrifying weapon, if you will, from that era. It was a massive starship, dwarfing even the most imposing vessels of the contemporary time. Its AI, though, was the most troubling part of the ship, as I've talked about previously. It was able to lock Astartes' armour and Mechanicus in place, leaving them just completely helpless and impotent, and they were treated with such disdain and contempt, such disrespect from the AI, that this was somehow more of a devastating blow to them than even its potent energy weapons, its impenetrable void shields, and its generally esoteric capabilities. Any examples of remnants such as these are from an age now forgotten entirely by the majority of humanity. It's only...
Wait, what happened with that ship? Where is it now? No, we can't allow something like that just to fall through the Imperium of Man's hands. They need to get it somehow. I don't know if well, I don't think they'll be able to understand the technology, but at least they should keep it for future projects. I don't know if it's possible, but wow.
Remembered by those few who have had access to ancient historical records or some level of very specifically authorized historical education, or also just fragments from people who spoke of those times, like the Journal of Keeper Cripius. But for those with a broader understanding of the timeline of humanity, the relics from the Dark Age serve as a grim and poignant reminder of what mankind once was capable of, and stands as a troublingly stark contrast to the grim, war-torn efforts of those who exist in M41. And so, within the Vhulian Swirl, within the Citadel, was hidden one of these relics of the golden age of humanity, now known only as the Dark Age of technology. None could fathom its original purpose or the manner of its construction and operation, but what they were able to discern were practical uses for this tool of devastating and incomprehensible power. But what was it? Well, within the Citadel was a construction known as the Void Claw. While the Fallen may have had their own plans for its use, those were very much now secondary to the wishes of Abaddon, as he and his Black Legion held with them a tense initial meeting, both sides greeting one another with the barrels of their bolters. What followed was a pretty terse discussion over control of the Void Claw. But Abaddon...
So essentially they were like, hello, how are you? I'm fine and you? I'm great. Welcome to the Citadel. Oh, crazy.
Abaddon had laid down hammer blows of power to back up his justifications, not least having made deals with other renegade chapters, the support of other legions and their demon primarchs, and that he had even spoken to, in whatever form accounts for it, the dark gods themselves, somehow also surviving this process intact. The Fallen obviously had strong opinions of their own. They saw the Void Claw as a means to unleash destruction against their most loathed enemies. But this was such small thinking compared to the intentions that Abaddon had for this Dark Age technology. The Void Claw was not as simple as just a gravity weapon, nor was it a concentrated beam of energy. It was instead something in between, but considerably more powerful than the two of these.
You know, when Luton says it's a Void Claw, I'm thinking it's like a glove, like a gauntlet. I don't know if it really is like that, or maybe it's something just, large, something very, very big. I'm not sure. But Void Claw, I'm thinking about a glove that probably manipulates space-time, and, it creates some sort of bubbles that also destroy or distort time and gravity. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. But maybe it's something totally different. It's just that the name is deceiving. But it just says Void Claw. Yeah.
The Void Claw, when activated, would force the fabric of space-time itself into a beam of crushing force to a singular point, then opening a gravitic anomaly no larger than a pearl. The singularity created at this point was so powerful that no shield or power of any kind could resist it. And of course, really unknown to the traitors, this technology had been seen before in Dark Age relics, and it also can be relatively likened to some weapons employed by the Eldari. For Abaddon though, this was legitimately a rare and extraordinary tool that he could use to reshape the NACHMUND gauntlet itself. His intention was to fire the Void Claw not at their enemies, but at an area of space between Vigilus and its moon, Neo Vellum. The result would be a severe gravity well that would draw masses of matter into the orbits from nearby bodies such as Vigilus, and then place the NACHMUND gauntlet into a dangerous state of contracted instability. Under the orders of Abaddon the Despoiler, the Fallen set to work in activating this relic of the Dark Age.
Wait a minute, what were the Fallen going to do with it exactly? Were they going to launch it at the monastery of the of the what are they called again? I forgot. The Dark Angels. Yes, were they going to fire it at the monastery of the Dark Angels and have the ship being destroyed? Yeah, no, that really is just a small-minded revenge, type of activity that is not required right now. Abaddon, I think he's got the right of it, in using it this way. Because if you're able to finally, close down the NACHMUND gauntlet with this device, really, this is like the ultimate victory. Separation of Imperium Nihilus and Imperium Sanctus this way, it will mean victory for the Chaos Guards as well as Abaddon. Yeah.
The Imperials were consumed with trivial irrelevances of preserving the life of a few billion citizens. The Despoiler was activating hardware that would reshape the entire future of the galaxy. Asandus, though, was less than pleased at having to bend their will to the demands of Abaddon, but he had no alternative options, certainly not the will or the forces to resist. But it also meant that it waylaid their plans for the device, as it had been their intention to turn this against, of course, the Dark Angels. He had previously planned to gather such a force of Fallen that the Dark Angels would have no choice but to investigate, and enable them to even learn of its location through deliberate, misdirected captures of the Fallen who had sacrificed themselves to the cause. And that's no small thing when you consider what awaits them in the bowels of the Dark Angel's citadel, the Rock, with its interrogator chaplains. His hope was that this could potentially lure the Dark Angel's fortress monastery itself to Vigilus, knowing that even if they began an orbital bombardment, the ancient, extremely powerful force fields around the citadel would protect it. Then, with no warning, he would have unleashed the Void Claw, destroying it with the focused power of the Singularity.
So I was right. I was right. That's what they're going to do. They're going to use this thing just to destroy the fortress monastery of the Dark Angels. Really? That's it? It's not really going to destroy the Dark Angels in totality. The Dark Angels are also traversing the entire galaxy. Oh, but they did say that they're going to try and attract the Dark Angels into one, specific point. And then with this weapon, they would not only destroy the monastery, but majority of the Dark Angel Astartes. Okay, I see that now. But still, compared to Abaddon's plan, this petty revenge is not worth it. Yeah.
Generated. As for the swirl around the citadel, it should be noted that even when in a passive state, the machinery and whatever enabled its terrible destructive power were in fact the true cause of this vast swirl around itself and the citadel. The Fallen, as of course with so many Imperials when discovering lost artifacts from the Dark Age of technology, had no full comprehension of the machine, in fact probably barely any comprehension of the machine. But they had been studying it, and they had attempted and been partially successful in using psychic communion to contact the spirit within the Void Claw, and reached what they believed was some level of affinity with the semi-sentient weapon. Now,
it has a machine spirit? Wow.
You can probably read into what that may be, but chances are it's probably some form of AI. So when Abaddon proposed his new plan to destroy, or at least severely cripple the NACHMUND gauntlet, Asandus became invigorated with the potential devastation that they could unleash upon the Imperium in one blow.
And can they use this weapon only once, or is it reusable? Yeah, I'm just wondering about that. Because if it is reusable, then this weapon is truly devastating. It's devastating. How many of these singularities can you make, taking yourself all the way to Terra to finally unleash it one last time to destroy the entire solar system? It's possible. It's possible. Jump out of the warp at the edge of the solar system and just fire it right there. Doesn't matter where. Just fire it right there. The gravitational force from this singularity would suck in the planets, would destabilize the orbit of the planets in the solar system. To literally shatter the order of the solar system and bring terror, into calamity. Yeah. If they're able to reuse it, it will be a very powerful and dangerous weapon.
It wasn't as good as their plan, but it was still pretty exciting. The Fallen applied the
Their plan was small, Luton. Their plan only focuses on the Dark Angels. It's not exciting, it's just small.
chantings and shattered ancient wards to bring the Void Claw into life, cracking, shuddering, not having been used for well over 10,000 years, the entire citadel was shaking to its foundations upon the activation of the device. The ancient machine of the Dark Age roared into life, its machined scream tearing through the atmosphere as the fabric of spacetime itself was torn by the creation of an incomprehensibly powerful singularity formed far above the orbit of the planet.
One last question about this device. Is it portable? Can you move it off the planet, or is it transfixed onto Vigilus? Because if it's transfixed onto Vigilus, then the plan that I've been talking about, then taking it all the way to Terra, might not work out. But if it is portable, if they're able to dislodge it from the planet or decouple it or something, unplug it from the planet and then put it on a ship and go out into space, then yes, this weapon really will be devastating. But if it's tied to the land of Vigilus, then yeah, you can only use it here. And maybe that's enough for, destroying the gauntlet, the NACHMUND gauntlet. But any future plans of destroying Terra with it might not come into existence. Yeah.
The lure of the Voidclaw's gravitic singularity, now known as the Vhulian anomaly, had devastating consequences for the Imperial war effort. The Vigilus Senate was overwhelmed with reports from all corners of the world, and messengers flooded the streets of Saints Haven, their command area, seeking aid and answers. War rooms were established throughout the Governor's Palace, each tasked with addressing specific battlegrounds. Despite Marneus Calagar's strategic prowess, the Imperial commanders found themselves now unable to comprehend or halt the ever-changing nature of the War of Nightmares. Disaster upon disaster unfolded faster than they could even be reported. And the first victims of the anomaly were the fleets orbiting Vigilus. As the Voidclaw's engines hummed to life, confusion gripped the Imperial admirals as Chaos ships veered off course, seemingly without reason. Arch-Commodore Vencitoria was the first to realise they were positioned to counteract the anomaly's effects. The Imperial fleet, however, lacked the same advantage. Outrider ships and escorts near the gravity well were flung way off course, crashing into the very ships that they were meant to protect. Planetside chaos erupted with explosions and mayhem. The Vhulian Swirl stretched upwards, a towering spiral reaching towards the anomaly, visible from halfway across the planet. The anomaly's hunger drew everything close towards it, causing havoc. In Hurricane Wreck, an orc-scrap city, every loose nut and screw rolled in unison, streaming out of the city, perplexing the mechs and amusing profit-seeking grots. Mega Borealis, Hyperia, Dirkdin, and Storval's spires crumbled and collapsed as the planet's tectonic plates trembled. Each collapse claimed thousands of lives, leaving burning debris to rain down on the streets. The greater Omnissiah hoist twisted and broke as the Sacrastora Hawking space station it was connected to was pulled towards the vortex.
And to think so much time and planning and resources were invested in taking it back, and now it's gone. Completely this time. It's been destroyed. Ugh. Yeah. Like I said, there is no mercy on this planet. There is no respite.
Neovellum experienced unseen changes as acid swamps slid and bubbled, bridges dissolved and transitways crumbled into corrosive muds. The most vital of resources for Vigilus also succumbed to the gravitational forces, the water. For it had been the secondary intention of the plan to further cripple the Astra Militarum and completely break the planet's morale. As the reality descended on the people of Vigilus, the hive sprawls teetered on the brink of total collapse. Water was being reduced to a trickle from their reservoirs and sumps in the form of streams that snaked away from the hive sprawls to the arid wastes drawn by the anomaly's pull.
That's crazy. That is crazy.
This water was partially absorbed by the parched landscape, but at other significant sources like the giant reservoirs, they were pulled into glittering rivers which all flowed towards the Vhulian Swirl.
That is crazy. That is crazy. I'll start crying. Right there, I'll start crying.
In other areas, there were even the bizarre formation of new shallow seas coursing across the desert. By now, desperate, dehydrated citizens fought one another, using any container available to collect precious water. Their initial triumph turned to desperation when they realised the water was so finite and time was running out. Scuffles erupted over newly formed rivulets, escalating quickly from fistfights to knife duels and even gun battles. Thirsting masses followed the flowing water towards the swirl, exacerbating the chaos. The Imperium's hold on Vigilus had already been weakened by relentless invasion, but it now suffered another hammer blow. With military forces prioritising their own water supplies and a collapsing populace, the world was tearing itself apart, creating even greater immediate problems than the invaders and further undermining the Imperium's control, which was exactly the point. Out in the voids of space, cosmic dust nebulas slowly closed in on the edge of the Vigilus system, drawn towards the Vhulian anomaly. The light of the system's star Astra Vigila steadily dimmed, slowly bringing the planet into a descending state of gloom and further dampening Imperial morale, for whom it felt like the very light of the Emperor was being extinguished before their eyes, and with it any hope that they still clung to. Abaddon knew the strength of this position. The traitors were confident this was a blow that the Imperials would surely be unable to recover from. The conflict for him was over before it had begun, at least in the eyes of the despoiler. Things were quite literally unravelling upon Vigilus, which now lay firmly in the grip of Abaddon's gravitic curse. The war upon the planet was undoubtedly physical, but at this point also very ideological. Forces were saturating their minds in every side of the fight. Traitors like the Wordbearers were doing as they always do and attempting to harness the power of the warp through some very convoluted plan. They had been attempting to draw the power of the warp and the energies of the Cicatrix Maledictum through Blackstone crowns or Noctilith crowns. And these crowns, it should be noted, are not for individuals, they are vital strong points for Chaos forces. These devices draw in the raw energy of Chaos itself and appear as what could be described as a gateway. And of course,
they are Chaos beachheads of invasion.
The Wordbearers had been arranging these around the planet in, like I say, a very convoluted plan to draw some greater event. The Death Guard had unleashed their plagues upon Dontoria, which continued to spread and suppurate, becoming so rife that they were decaying the very material of structures within the hive sprawl, as well as the citizens. And despite being caught off guard and bogged down by the Dirkton humans, the Night Lords continued to fight, savouring the intensity of combat they had not anticipated. And then of course the Iron Warriors were continuing their 10,000 year bitter feud with the Imperial Fists over the control of Mortwald. As for the Imperials, they unsurprisingly were here for the duration. They would not back down, not surrender, and give no inch of ground without making the enemy pay for it bitterly with blood. They clung to their hopes, but the planet was beyond any kind of traditional defence at this point. They had entered the end time, and all that was left now was to engage in the kind of warfare that the Imperium had been fighting against their darkest foes for millennia. This would be a fight to the end now, and as one civilian leader of Vigilus exclaimed, "This is a war that cannot be won. What good are even a score of Space Marine chapters if all they can do is claim victory over the desiccated corpse of a once great world? We shall all be dead by the time they slay the monsters that come from the spires. How can we feed ourselves, our children, if even the water that we crave is being drained by dark magic? All is lost. We can but look to our own survival in the last few days of this apocalypse and wish death to those who would hinder us." It was a sentiment largely felt by the populace, who had invested their hopes and faith in the legendary saviours of the Imperium. Yet even with the mighty Marneus Calagar leading their forces, all they had seen was failure after failure, and at a terrible price. The beleaguered Imperials knew that defensive strategies were no longer practical at this juncture, and the time had come to switch to a final strategy of all-out, unrestrained war.
When you're backed into a corner, the only way forward is into that enemy. Do it. Let's see if any type of hope or chance is able to be made from this. Push forward.
But unrestrained did not mean throwing lives away without thought. At the same time, engaging with all their enemies simultaneously would only lead to disaster. Calagar knew this, and so did the Vigilus Senate, so they set about finally reassessing the local knowledge available to formulate a strategy that could yield some breathing space. Amidst the confusion, the riots, the panic that engulfed the cities, there was the relatively open and, more importantly, unoccupied wastelands. that they could use as a strategic battlefield for Calagar's calculated manoeuvres. His hope would be that by attacking where it was least expected, they could force their enemies into situations they themselves did not anticipate, weakening and splitting their attentions. Then the Imperial forces would drive one enemy toward another, hoping to annihilate both in the ensuing clash.
Okay.
This strategy may sound familiar for those who know Imperial history, and that's because they were attempting to apply the approach of Inquisitor Kryptman here, albeit at a much smaller scale.
Oh, like how he directed the Tyranid forces or the orcs to fight each other. I think that's the plan that Lutin is talking about. Or maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe, Kryptman done another plan. But yeah, I think it's that one. Okay.
A desperate strategy to use when few, if any, alternatives were available to them. Among the Space Marines who had faced the Orcs, they had observed and long understood the Xenos' obsession with speed and reckless violence. Additionally, when faced with enemy targets, they would inevitably engage with not the most tactically sound or the weakest forces, but usually those who presented them with the greatest chance of a brutal heavy fight, and especially if this involved the Astartes themselves. So Calagar and his council, including other chapter masters, reasoned that if they could relocate the World Eaters, the Crimson Slaughter and the Red Corsairs away from the cities and into these wastelands, they could become caught up in the speed war of the Orcs. All of these traitors were so tunnel-visioned at this point, so overconfident in inflicting maximum slaughter to the Imperials, that they were actually able to be shifted fairly easily towards the wastelands, because in their eyes the humans were just fleeing, and this illusion was bolstered by the fact that the Imperials continued to take heavy losses, not only from the traitors themselves but also from Orcs engaging them, so it seemed not at all suspicious to the traitors. If anything, it fitted with their reasoning that the Imperials were just collapsing at this point and even making terrible mistakes such as running into the open.
So it's some sort of organized retreat, and the Chaos and Renegade Marines don't realize this. They just think that the enemy is cowering before them and, they're just trying to escape into the desert. While on the other side, the Orcs are hearing all of this calamity, all of this revelry of battle, and they are going towards that noise like moths to the flame. Okay.
Their mind's order was falling apart, so why wouldn't the humans flee wherever they could? For the Imperials, it was a very expensive but also successful gambit. This new strategy was one the Imperials had largely been forced to accept now. They could no longer win a straight defensive fight and face the reality of having to sacrifice many thousands in order to just make minimal gains, because in the bigger picture this was all they had left, if they still were to hold out any hope of even some form of survival by the end. Predictably, the speed warg of the Orcs appeared on the blurred, heat-shimmering horizon, drawn by the spectacle and the sounds of the explosive, bloody conflict. They
Space Marines!
Raced at full speed, cheering and firing from their vehicles directly towards the raging fight between loyalists and traitors. So suddenly, and to the shock of the traitors, the Imperials turned and fled, but in an unexpectedly disciplined withdrawal. The Chaos forces attempted to follow, but found themselves under heavy suppressing fire now, and lacking any significant aerial assets, they were unable to evacuate in time from the kill zones that they now found themselves in. The raging, hyped-up Orcs broke upon them like a tsunami, and the Chaos Marines were swiftly overwhelmed by the blood-thirsting Orcs, who quite literally threw themselves into the melee scrum, relishing this challenge posed by the new and powerful opponents. Initially, of course, the traitors held the line against the comparatively disorganised Orc forces. They were far more enthusiastic than they were focused on breaking the strong defensive rings formed by the traitor Astartes, but as they were beginning to feel they could handle the Greenskins' assault, another wave of Orcs hit them, and then another, and another, until the sheer numbers of Orcs foaming at the mouth and screaming, "Oi, Space Marines, I got a big shooter for you!" became insurmountable.
Yes. I like this. In the beginning, with the what the G-Stealer called what they were doing to the Chaos Marines, I supported that. With what the Orcs are doing here to the Chaos Marines, I support that too. We'll deal with who becomes the victor of this little, battle. We'll deal with them later. But right now, I support the Orcs. Push.
In a few hours, little combat could be seen by the Imperials watching from afar. The orcs were simply speeding around in their vehicles, doing donuts, ripping apart the remains of marines on the ground, and seemed generally pretty genuinely jubilant, especially having in many cases literally torn their enemies apart. Giving the orcs a win like this though, it wasn't something one would usually relish in seeing, not because of its distaste, but because it often strengthened them up for whatever they were going to plan to attack next.
I would gamble on them more than the Chaos Marines. I gamble on the orcs. You know, we can somehow deal with the orcs. They are manageable. You know, they are manageable. That's why also with Cryptman's plan of, you know, having the Tyranids fight against the orcs, I wanted the orcs to win that conflict. At least we would be able, you know, to manage the orcs. Yes, they'll be extremely strong and powerful, but we would still be able to manage them. If the Tyranids, I think they did win that conflict that Cryptman, you know, organized. You know, if the Tyranids won that battle, it would be devastating, truly devastating. They would have absorbed all of those orcs and just become an even more powerful, dangerous opponent for the Imperium of Man. So in this case as well, you know, I want the orcs to win, and I want the Chaos Marines to lose. We can deal with the orcs, but if the Chaos Marines win, it's going to be difficult. So yeah, I'd rather choose them.
But in this very dismal situation, it was certainly the lesser of the evils. At the sprawl of Mega Borealis lay what was known to the Mechanicus as the Bastion of Blackstone Treasures, or Silo 15 of Thundersump. Until now, this had remained defiantly protected by its near impenetrable macro-grade refractor field. Small adjacent to refractor field is a complex web of intricate energy matrices. Again, like most things, they originate from the Dark Age of technology, and its purpose is to harness the fabric of reality. It bends and distorts to provide a protective shield, and it operates on the principle of refraction, redirecting incoming threats to nullify their potential energy. Kinetic projectiles, be these bolts or regular shells, will be dispersed into harmless showers of sparks. Powerful thermal energy such as flame or scorching plasma become instantaneously converted into bursts of blinding light, and even the raw power of nuclear detonations will be simply diffused into harmless glimmers. Most assaults upon a refractive field will be rendered in this way, where weapons of devastating force are reduced to a mere spectacle of pyrotechnics. Of course, they're not completely insurmountable, but a heavy field based not around an individual but within the infrastructure of a city will have very powerful generators requiring an extremely powerful assault upon it. And this was the task now faced by Abaddon, who sought to shatter this defensive barrier before he could engage his plan of laying waste to the Noctilith substance held within. Yet it was not going to be a quick victory, which the traitors really were beginning to need at this point, and they observed how his first wave of demon engines were met with unexpected resistance. The tech priests of Mega Borealis, though admittedly ignorant of the true origins and power of the Blackstone Horde, fiercely guarded the spear or pylon-like deposits unearthed from the depths of Vigilus. These constructs, with their suspiciously alien craftsmanship and intricately linear channels, hinted at some kind of advanced knowledge waiting to be revealed. The Mechanicus were so protective of this bounty that Silo 15 became their fortress, with imposing bastion walls and permanently deployed garrisons. Additionally, a massive heavy-duty vault was constructed around the stockpile to safeguard the mysterious resource. Abaddon's demon engines were held back now, their pent-up ferocity yearning to be set loose. The brazen beasts were devoted worshippers of the blood god and had arrived on the planet within the Cerberite, a truly hellish abomination, once a noble voidcraft, now having remained so long within the warp and the Eye of Terror that it had transformed into a monstrous, half-living demon engine. And when the ship had descended to the planet's...
You mean the ship? Wow. So it's alive, it's sentient. Huh.
Surface and attempted to breach the refractor field by pressing down upon it with the underside of the vessel, it remained defiant. The ship roared out droning screams of corrupted scrap code that sent tremors through the machine spirits of countless barriers and vault seals. Helldrakes poured from the ship as clanking metallic pseudopods clawed down through the spires of Mega Borealis. Demon engines poured forth and were steadily now overwhelming the Mechanicus defenders, including no less than 300 Lords of Skulls. The methodical logic of the Mechanicus had not anticipated nor was prepared for the sheer brutality and savagery of the demonic engine assault. and it broke them in fairly short order. The coming of the Seborite had also caused other forces to rush to the site of the battle. Not to mention that the Orcs were now seeking a new place to have a go at, which saw masses of their trucks carrying the scrap creations of Big Tanker smashing through Mechanicus Skitarii lines and straight into, thankfully, hordes of the Chaos Cultists and Renegades. The Orc known as Cruel Daka was on a full rampage at this point, and no amount of enemy fire weird stompy demon machines was going to stop the Speed Boys. And so when confronted by a raging Mauler fiend, Cruel Daka enthusiastically climbed atop his truck's cab and tore the head from the beast with his power claw. The boys were having a quite literal smashing time. The Speed War drove on. With all of the continual assaults though, and now with the silo laid open, its field dispersed, the vengeful spirit opened up with a bombardment of cyclonic torpedoes which hit the silo with a planet-shattering force, completely obliterating Silo 15 and
I guess the party's over.
The Blackstone inside of it. The Speedlord Cruel Daka, along with everything else within a massive radius, including the forces of Chaos and all the Mechanicus, had been slaughtered by Abaddon's bombardment, with the majority of the engines of the brazen beasts and only those with true demon blood within them were able to survive.
Abaddon the party pooper. Yeah, it's over.
Howling praise now to the Blood God, for Khorne cares not from whence blood flows, and such an indiscriminate slaughter would please the Blood God greatly. The Warmaster would then reinforce with a vast horde of bloodletters who would, along with the brazen beasts, begin to occupy a significant portion of the Mega Borealis hive sprawl. Abaddon had achieved one of his core objectives, but the War of Vigilus and the broader conflict of the NACHMUND Gauntlet was still to reach its apex.
You mean there's more? You mean after all of this that's just happened on the planet with the water being sucked away, like it's not over? Calagar, I don't know what you're gonna do, my guy, but hey, you need a miracle here.
Abaddon had intentions that would determine the fate of the galaxy, and all that stood between him and the complete destruction of Vigilus and the NACHMUND Gauntlet were a heavily weakened force of Imperials and Astartes. The final stand of the Imperium on Vigilus was about to begin.
He is with you here, but his realm encompasses far more. The hive sprawl beyond is just one continent, the bastion of Vigilus. He calls you all to give everything you have, and with his servants can do nothing less. Oh, wow, guys, yeah, that is it with the Great NACHMUND War Part 2. I think it's called Vigilus Burns, right? Yes, Vigilus Burns, Warhammer 40,000 lore history made on the Luton09 YouTube channel. Yeah, it's not over on Vigilus, you know. we're going to be dragging this planet, kicking and screaming, you know, until it's nothing left but just a sea of blood, bones, ash, and sand. That's it. Really, this planet is going through the most. Really, all of these different factions, all fighting amongst each other, all vying for control. And here's Abaddon, you know, just making things even worse, 10 times worse, you know. And his plan of using the Void Claw to help seal the NACHMUND gauntlet is also just going to be devastating for the Imperium Nihilus and Imperium Sanctus. If he's able to succeed in closing off this vital route for the Imperium of Men, really, Nihilus, the dark side of the Imperium, is doomed. It is doomed. It will be in the hands of you know, all the other Xeno races, and including the Chaos forces. So yeah, I don't know what Marinus Augustus Calagar is going to do about this. I don't know if there's a way to nullify that singularity with another singularity, you know, where they just hit each other and then they cancel each other out or something. I don't know how he's gonna stop this situation, but hopefully there's a way. Hopefully there is a way. And yeah, I am going to miss the Supreme, not the Supreme, what do they call him? The Speed Lord of the Orcs. What's his name again? Cruel Darker? Yeah, Cruel Darker. He will be missed. He will be missed. Him and his entire posse or Orc horde are going to be missed, because now that they are gone, the Imperium of Man forces now have to contend with the Genestealer cult, as well as the Chaos Marines that are still alive, especially those who do not die, because they are 100% demons. So yeah, they're still going to have to be fighting against these factions, and it's going to be a very difficult situation for the Imperium of Man forces. But I have hope in Calagar doing something. I don't know how you're going to do it. I don't know when you're going to do it, but something. Please, please do something. It's becoming really scary now, really. But yeah, guys, that is it with part 2. I don't know when part 3 is coming out, or maybe it has already come out. I'll just double check on his YouTube channel, Luton09's YouTube channel, if part 3 is out already. But you know, as soon as part 3 is ready, I will react to it as well, and hopefully you guys will also be there to watch my reaction. Remember, guys, if you want to check out the original video as well as Luton09's YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. If you like my reaction, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos, and I'll see you guys next time. Yeah. Good luck, Helga. You're gonna need it. You are going to need it.